People who grew up poor, what did you believe/do that was normal, but later realized it wasn't? Moving out until my parents split. My dad used to have drug dealers calling the house looking for him. He knew this, so he'd leave my mom and 2 babies home alone while he left somewhere safer. My mom was clueless about it until one showed up, walked through and told her if he found my dad he'd break both his knees. Thankfully for us, the good guy drug dealer was only concerned with hurting my dad and not his kid's wife. He'd dropped hundreds on drugs and leave my mom with noodles and tomato sauce to feed us. When they split we moved to a place with no AC, so we'd sleep outside on a small mattress when it got too hot. My mom used to make up names to make dinner more exciting. We ate potatoes, if we were lucky, 3 to 4 times a week. Other times we had plain noodles, or whatever the food bank gave us. As a kid I used to believe I was the only poor person. I was always so embarrassed and felt like I had to pretend I wasn't, so not even my closest friends knew the extent of it. As I got older it became very clear that I wasn't the only one, but the loneliness was real. I have my own kids now, and while we're not rich, we're far better off than most. I make sure my kids know that not everyone has it as good as them. They're still young, but they love donating toys, food, and clothes. Not sure how far that stuff goes, but if my kids learn from it, it's a win. Don't go by dates on food packaging. If it looks and smells okay, it was fine to eat. Did you ever end up with food poisoning from this? I ask as I'm not quite sure what the best practice actually is. My ex used to eat stuff that was to me at least too far past the sell by best by date to be consumed safely, and she never got seriously ill from it. I've got a coworker who, according to his testimony, hasn't even vomited since 1994, and he routinely eats taquilla leftovers that have been stored carelessly or for periods far beyond what's traditionally deemed safe with no ill effects. I've actually seen him leave a box of half-eaten pizza in his car for a weekend on a Saturday at work and eat it on Monday. This is in the fall. It wasn't even close to being refrigerator temps at the time. Gives me the chills. Never had food poisoning as far as I can recall. It's more about using common sense. If the food is obviously moldy or smells slightly off I throw it away. If it seems fine I eat it. I try to also store things properly though, to ensure they don't go off quickly and last longer. Your coworker may just have an iron stomach and seems to have gotten lucky, because I wouldn't do that with leftover pizza. I can see how some poor people's experiences could be the exact opposite, leading them to take excellent care for their belongings. But for me, it was normal to see how dysfunctional and broken things are, and you have to use improvised solutions to get stuff to work. Probably because of poor quality or things just being really old and handed down, it made me expect that everything is always half broken, and you have creative ways of making it work. The idea that things should generally be functional else you have to properly fix them or replace them is something that many years after I'm still not used to. Although I definitely can't say I grew up poor, my dad always makes sure to buy new stuff only if the old is completely used up or broken. If he could find a way to make it work, we kept it, and slowly, expecting us to do the same. I still can't get my head over buying something new if you have an overall working older version. My kitchen sink drain is a Frankensteinian mashup of 3 different kits that is held together by good vibes and not looking at it too intensely. My oven hasn't worked in half a year. I'm not poor, I'm lazy. I will always use the fastest option to postpone the problem, if at all possible. Only sources sugar in the house were in sachets taken from places. If mum cooked potatoes she'd normally use the water to make clear soup, which was just potato water and a couple of stock cubes. A normal meal would be beans on toast or fish fingers, baked beans, and instant mash. A special treat was Chinese mash, which was frozen carrots, peas and broccoli mushed up into instant mashed potatoes. Don't take this the wrong way, that Chinese mash sounds really good, and that's a really creative way to make mashed potatoes different. We loved it. We had a Chinese takeaway one time at my grandparents' as a kid, and so me and my sister just decided that anything with the word Chinese in it was automatically delicious. I think my nan called it that out of desperation to get us to eat our veggies, and it totally worked. So much so we'd beg our mum for it at home all the time. It wasn't until about 5 years after that, and my parents both had way better paying jobs, that I realized that Chinese mash totally wasn't a thing. I still make it for myself whenever I feel like cooking something served with mashed potatoes. Just throw some veg in, and coarse salt and pepper and boom, Chinese mash. My dad had me absolutely convinced that rice with water and a little sugar was a fantastic meal. I would request it every night, and my dad would agree. My mom would act hurt by the request, telling me about this other meal she had planned on making, but would begrudgingly give in to us eventually. It wasn't until much later that I realized there was never any other food made, nor was there anything ever prepped defrosted for an alternative meal. That was their entire meal plan, and they did everything they could to get me to enjoy it. Butter sugar rice is what my kids call it, and it's a lifesaver. You mean breakfast rice? It was the second thing I ever learned to cook, first being spaghetti. I'd wake up an hour earlier than the rest of my family, just to make sure it was ready for them to eat, before we went to schoolwork. Now, as an adult carrot TM, my friends are amazed by just how many different meals I can make using rice as the main ingredient. My old roommate still makes breakfast rice whenever he doesn't feel like making a full breakfast, and he didn't even know it was a thing until I made it. My parents both worked when I was little. Mom watched me on weekdays, dad on weekends. Dad was until very recently always on call. Even on those weekends he was watching me. They couldn't afford a babysitter, so whenever something needed fixed at work he would bring me. I had my own set of earplugs and safety glasses, and the guys in the control room humored my curiosity and would answer questions about the equipment they were monitoring. Discovered this was unusual when I hit grade school and all my friends were pumped about bring your kid to work day. I remember them talking about being excited to see what their parents did and being extremely confused because by the time I was 6, I could read a Honeywell plant status page without much trouble and would talk your ear off about PLCs because of my many trips to work with dad. I had no idea it was because we were poor. I'd just thought dad wanted to quench my curiosity. My dad had a similar on-call status. I loved going to his work on the weekends because there were playboys in the bathroom. Sounds like my kind of workplace. I never knew how to order a meal at a nice restaurant or even what an actual restaurant meal tasted like. I was 17 at the time, and when he asked what type of steak I wanted I just said cooked. I honestly didn't know about rare, medium rare and well done. It was like nothing I had ever eaten before in my life. Even the chips tasted better than anything I've ever had. Spins me out when I see little kids at nice restaurants. They really don't know how lucky they are. Reading through this thread and then reading this made me think about lots of things many of us have for granted and normal while many people didn't or don't in this world. It's a ref up world this of ours. BTW. The first time they asked me what kind of steak I wanted, I said I wanted a big one, haha. First time I went to a restaurant was with a friend in high school. His parents took us out, and I was very confused when they told me to order something. I had a bit of money on me to pay for the cinema after but nothing for food. That food was amazing. I had only ever eaten at McDonald's before then. Sort of the same idea, I used to be really uncomfortable in restaurants. I didn't understand why other people liked going to them so much. Fact is that, until I was around 16 or so I went to a restaurant less than once a year, so I just wasn't used to them. After my friends started getting cars, they started taking me out and buying me food in restaurants. That's the only way I began to get used to it. I actually used to hate it because I felt so out of place and strange and was always afraid I'd do some faux pas or something. Same. Growing up, my family only went to a restaurant for a special occasion, like a graduation or a confirmation. I found it very odd that my HS friends always wanted to go to a chain restaurant like Applebee's or Olive Garden. Like, there was no occasion for it, we were just meeting up. It took me years to get adjusted to chains, and some more time for actual restaurants. Same here. I just learned to wait for others to do stuff and follow their lead. Clean your plate. It is really hard to manage my weight now that my family doesn't need to fight to have a simple meal. I always clean my plate because I never knew when the next time I was gonna eat, but now I realize most people just stop when they are full. Maybe putting a container Tupperware that's empty beside you when you eat will help. Eat slow. Count your chews and don't just shovel. Drink a full glass of water before you eat and stop when you feel full. Put your leftovers into the container so you know that you'll have it tomorrow. I actually ended up eating less than I used to by just starting out with the intent on cooking for the purpose of having several meals from it. I feel a perverse sense of pride when I'm able to eat several meals from just preparing one. I do this too. I can't seem to finish eating until there is no food left. I'm not really overweight, but I have a bit of pudge that I have been struggling to reduce a bit. I remember coming home from first grade. As homework, we had to count how many doors we had. We had 3 total, and one was just a curtain. My siblings and I 5 total slept in the same room. We also used cut up rags as toilet paper. We didn't have a boiler until I was in the 10th grade. We had to boil water before. That's just some of the things I can remember. ATM. Coming home from elementary school and being alone for at least an hour until my sister came home from middle school. Rice and beans for days. Not complaining, though. That's some good stuff. Still one of my favorite simple meals. I realize that this is why I'm easy to please. I didn't have much growing up. My husband was confused because he'd never met a woman who didn't like jewelry. Lol. Buying gifts for you must be very easy or very difficult. I got you jambalaya on rice. Wow, thanks for sharing your intimate stories. Even though I didn't have the exact experience as everyone here, it's interesting how much I can relate to the overall sentiment. A few days ago, my so teased me about being messy and asked if I ever put away my toys as a baby. When the playtime was over, I realized I never had more than a couple of toys at a time, so I have no recollection of organizing toys. Until quite recently, I attributed it more to my mom's strict style of educating and disciplining me, rather than lack of money. I even came to appreciate what she had taught me whenever I encountered spoiled children who did not know how to cope with disappointment or denial. Unlike them, I expected to get one wish fulfilled, if I was lucky, after hearing no 99 times. My mom later told me how sad it made her feel to be unable to provide enough for her young daughter. Well, luckily I never felt that way.